Jacob's Well looks a lot different these days.
Jacob's Well has not been open for nearly a year.
Jacob's Well in Texas looks serene with its crystal blue waters. But beneath the surface lies something far more chilling. For decades, divers have vanished, disappear without a trace. Now, cutting-edge underwater drones are finally revealing the truth. What they found is enough to send chills down your spine. What secrets hide in chambers no one returns from? Why do experienced divers lose their lives in still waters? Could something even darker be waiting below? In this video, we uncover the shocking discovery transforming Jacob's Well from a natural wonder into a confirmed nightmare. Dive in, if you dare. Beauty that bites back. At first glance, Jacob's Well doesn't just look safe, it looks sacred. A mirror-clear pool tucked into the heart of Texas hill country, framed by wildflowers and limestone cliffs. The site is postcard perfect. Its calm, glassy surface reflects blue skies and surrounding trees like a painting come to life. It's not just beautiful, it's inviting. Families bring picnic baskets, kids jump off rocks, couples snap selfies on the edge. No one expects danger, at least not right away. But that's exactly why Jacob's Well is so terrifying. What most people don't realize is that the well is just the surface expression of an ancient artesian spring system. The entrance itself is only about 12 feet across, but it plunges downward through a series of vertical shafts and submerged chambers carved from limestone. Altogether, it descends over 140 feet into the earth, with passageways stretching more than 4,500 feet in twisting directions. What begins as a pool for swimming quickly becomes a claustrophobic nightmare. Tight tunnels, blind corners, sudden pressure drops. This is a place designed by nature to mislead. The beauty is a trap. For decades, divers have flocked to Jacob's Well, drawn by its mythic reputation and the challenge it presents. And for decades, it's claimed them. Over a dozen divers have lost their lives in this deceptively peaceful place. Some went too far, others ran out of air. But in many cases, the cause of death has never been fully understood. It's not just miscalculation, it's disorientation, it's panic. It's the feeling, as several survivors have described, that the cave wants you. One former diver called it the most beautiful death trap in America. And that description isn't exaggeration, it's earned. The third chamber in particular is infamous among cave divers. When you cross the threshold, the visibility is zero. A claustrophobic tunnel closes in on you. The water temperature dips. Your sense of direction starts to fracture. Even experienced divers describe a feeling of something moving around them. A sense that the well somehow changes when it recognizes conscious, living beings who have gone too deep. Survivors of deeper dives describe feeling watched. They say that the well not only hides secrets from the world, it guards them. And if it weren't creepy enough, the phenomenon of selective survival also has a long history attached to Jacob's Well. Divers have entered together, side by side, yet one has left while the other literally vanished without a trace. Equipment fails for reasons unknown. Safety lines get tangled. Light sources flicker. Some have reported air tanks draining faster than should physiologically be possible. Large portions of the cave remain unexplored, not just too deep, but too unstable to risk entering at all. Perennially, thrill-seekers and daredevils gather for a rendezvous. They walk up to the edge, peer into the void, and tell themselves this time will be different. They will be smarter, be more careful, and be better prepared. But Jacob's Well does not consider experience. In fact, most of those who fell victim to it were not novices. They were experts, cavers, instructors, and certified technical divers. Yet, they still did not come back. Because the danger here is not obvious. It is not loud. It is subtle. It seduces you with sunlight and stillness, then waits. The worst part? No signposts are warning strongly enough to herald the danger. No posted notice can prepare you for what lies below. No surface beauty can reveal the terror that lies waiting below. A siren song, sung softly, and in silence. And yet, even with this deadly legacy, it wasn't until recently that the truth started to surface. Because, for the first time in history, someone sent something down that couldn't be scared, or disoriented, or drowned. Drone footage that changed everything. For years, human divers were the only eyes brave enough to face Jacob's Well's hidden depths. But no matter how skilled or determined, they all reached a point where the cave said, "No more." A tunnel too narrow, a chamber too black, a moment where instinct shouted, "Turn back." And most listened, because the ones who didn't often didn't return. But technology doesn't panic. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't get pulled into fear. And that's why, when human exploration hit its limit, the experts sent something else down. A submersible drone. This wasn't a toy. This was a high-tech underwater machine fitted with floodlights strong enough to pierce pitch darkness, high-resolution cameras, sonar, and the kind of rugged build that could survive where a human body couldn't. The mission was simple, on paper. Descend into the well, capture footage, map what human eyes had never seen. No panic, no hesitation, just data. The drone slipped into the water under the control of seasoned operator Mike Garfield, a veteran in remote underwater expeditions. He'd guided drones through collapsed mines, shipwrecks, and volcanic vents. But even he admitted something about Jacob's Well felt different. The first chamber was stunning. The drone sent back footage of gently spiraling limestone walls, clear blue water, and reflections that danced like light through glass. It was beautiful, postcard perfect, exactly like the well looked from above. But even through a screen, viewers could sense the tone shift. As the drone descended into the second chamber, that beauty began to dim. The water lost its shimmer. The light bounced less. The silence deepened. On screen, the tunnel began to narrow. And then, like a curtain being pulled back, the third chamber revealed itself. The lights of the drone cut through clouds of silt. At this point, it is not interesting footage, but chilling in nature. First came the debris, oxygen tanks half buried in gravel, a diving fin caught in a crevice, a camera case wedged into the stone. These weren't artifacts. These were personal possessions reminding us of lost lives. Every piece had a name, a story, a life once attached to it. Then came the glove. For just a moment in the frame, it floated, tattered, pale, but undeniably human. As the drone panned past, a shadow flickered across the beam. Not a fish, not a reflection, a shape, silent, still, drifting slowly, like a hand, a single detached form suspended in the water. It lasted only a second, maybe less. But the people watching the feed in real time froze. Was it perhaps just an illusion? Who knows? Yet every diver there was aware of what they had seen, and none laughed. No, this awful footage became worse. The glove, or maybe even an apparent hand. But it's what came after that really counted. A half-buried, partially buried, worn-out, obsolete dive mask, completely domed to death since at least the time of the moon landings. That's when whispers began in the control room. Names began to be mentioned, names of divers long assumed to be gone and never found. Then the drone moved a little deeper into the chamber, and then there it was. A glint of silver caught in a gravel context, an oxygen tank, rusty, almost unreadable at first, but certainly real. And right beside, a torn wetsuit sleeve, a souvenir held in place by time that seemed outstretched. And they found a body, wedged between stone walls, the limbs twisted and contorted, the suit faded, but it was still there, still dressed, a diver. The room stared in silence as the drone focused its search. And from underneath the mud came the emergence of a name tag. One name, Maupin. A ghost was just exorcised from the cave. Kent Maupin, missing since 1979, was no longer missing. He had been there all along, deep in the third chamber. It wasn't a myth, it wasn't a rumor, and it's still waiting. But finding him wasn't the end of the mystery. In fact, it only deepened it, because Kent didn't go down alone. And the second diver? He was never found, until now. The discovery of a lost diver. Finding Kent Maupin was never supposed to happen. He had been lost to Jacob's Well for over 4 decades, his name whispered by divers like a ghost story told too close to midnight. But now, his body had been found, wedged in the third chamber, preserved in a watery crypt. It was the kind of discovery that ends a mystery, or so they thought, because Kent didn't go down there alone. Back in 1979, he had entered the well with a partner, Mark Brashear, a fellow diver and a friend, young, hungry for challenge, and just as daring. The story of their final dive was already legendary in the diving community. Two brave men entered the fourth chamber and vanished. For years, their disappearance was marked by rumor, regret, and the echoing silence of failed recovery attempts. But now, Kent was found. And Mark? He was still missing. Until the drone footage began revealing more than anyone could have expected. It started with a subtle detail, a glowing object just beyond Kent's resting place, barely visible behind a curtain of gravel. At first, the team thought it might be old equipment, another tank, a discarded flashlight, but the shimmer wasn't metallic, it was glass. And when the drone inched closer, the outline became clearer. A faceplate, a diver's mask. Mike Garfield, the drone operator, narrowed the focus. He zoomed in as gently as possible, not wanting to disturb the fragile scene. And there it was. Another body. This one was harder to see, not lodged as tightly, but lying just beyond the bend of the third chamber, as if he had tried to crawl back. The wetsuit was torn in places, his arms outstretched. Unlike Kent, this diver had movement in his final moments. He had tried to fight, and then came the detail no one could ignore. A second name tag, half torn, but still clinging to the fabric of the sleeve. Brashear. The shock hit harder than before. Not because it was more surprising, but because no one ever truly expected to find him. Kent had become the focus over time, the name repeated the most, the image tied to the cave's legend. Mark was the quiet shadow, remembered but fading. Now, the cave had given both of them back. Its weight landed hard on everyone watching. For decades, people believed that the well simply swallowed the men beyond retrieval. A cave-in, deep water current, or total equipment failure were the theories. But the reality, captured on high-resolution footage, told a different story in terribly grim detail. Apart from that, they hadn't panicked. They hadn't made rookie mistakes. They had gone too far. And Jacob's well hadn't let them go. Later analysis revealed something chilling. Experts thought, based on the condition of equipment and sediment layers around them, that Mark may have survived minutes longer than Kent. Just long enough to understand what had happened. Long enough to realize one was not getting out. And that's where the mystery took a cruel turn. Because the divers watching the footage noticed something else. Scratch marks left on the rock where Mark's body lay. Light, erratic, but there. Where a knife or metal tank had been used to try and dig or signal from below the surface. Evidence of a struggle, a final, desperate attempt to break free. And it didn't end there. Some of the cameras equipped on the drone recorded a short loop of rope wedged into some tight corner, not attached to either of the divers, but probably the remnant of some failed rescue attempt, as if someone might have tried to reach them and then turned back. It was not about disappearance, but entrapment, and more cruelly, the knowledge that they died near each other, feet away, barely out of reach. One dive, two friends, and a cave that had kept its secret for 40 years, waiting to reveal what it had done. But Jacob's well wasn't finished, because the chamber that took Kent and Mark had a name, and it was only the beginning. The Cathedral of No Return, beneath the surface of Jacob's well, past the clear blue waters and twisting limestone corridors, lies a place divers call the Cathedral of No Return. The name isn't poetic, it's a warning. This fourth chamber has claimed more lives than all the others combined. And for those who've dared to enter, the name becomes prophecy. The passage into the cathedral isn't marked by grandeur, but by pressure. It starts with a squeeze so narrow that divers are forced to remove their tanks, push them through ahead of them, then wiggle forward, shoulders scraping rock, lungs burning, hoping their exit path doesn't collapse behind them. The gravel in this section doesn't sit still. It shifts with the water, flowing like wet sand, sometimes filling in spaces just cleared seconds before. It's not a stable tunnel, it's a living, collapsing trap. When the submersible drone descended toward the cathedral, the entire control room tensed. It wasn't just about depth anymore, it was about risk. The well had a history of punishing those who probed too far. And even though the drone had no pulse, what it was moving into had a presence that felt aware. The chamber expanded slowly in front of the drone's camera. At first, it was a tight corridor, lined with jagged limestone edges and sediment hanging in the water like smoke. Then it opened, not wide, not welcoming, but just enough to give you the illusion of space. That's why divers gave it the name Cathedral. The walls arched slightly, the rock polished smooth in places from water flow. It looked beautiful until you noticed the silence. There's a kind of quiet down there that doesn't exist anywhere else. A silence so thick that even the whir of the drone's motor felt intrusive. The light beams cut through the black, revealing silt-covered artifacts that no one expected. A mask here, a strap there, even the edge of a broken flipper. Not relics, warnings. Then the drone's light landed with something that made everyone inside stay frozen. Fresh drag marks, not longer than a few inches, etched in the silt, like something or someone had moved recently. But how? There is no movement here, no current, not a living soul. Nothing lives down here, no breath. Then began the dread. Mike Garfield, the operator of the drone, said it first. It is shifting. Gravel nears the floor of the cathedral to start clouding upward, not falling, but rising, as if the well were putting on an act for the drone. The sediment curls up like smoke under a glass lid, and in seconds the feet's visibility drops to inches. Back it out, someone said. No, Mike whispered. There's something else. He swung the drone's lights to the chamber's far end, and that's when they saw the wall. Not rock, not gravel. A barrier of compacted silt like a dam sealing off the cave's end. But something about it didn't look natural. The shape wasn't random. It was rounded, arch-like, almost like a door. That's how some experts called it later on. The door. No one knows what lies beyond it, if it lies at all. No diver has ever passed through. The drone could not push past the debris. It tried, but even machines are not immune to the cave's grip. One of its propellers jammed with pebbles. Lights flickered. The feed cut once. And then, after what felt like forever, it reversed course. The cathedral had made its point. The only thing it brought back was the footage, and no artifacts or samples. But the questions that came from that dive have kept scientists, geologists, and divers battling ever since. How deep does the cathedral go? What lies beyond the door? And, most importantly, why does this chamber seem deliberate? Jacob's Well might be a geological formation, but after what they saw in the cathedral, more than one person admitted something they wouldn't say out loud before. It doesn't feel like a cave. It feels like something that's waiting. And whatever it's waiting for, it hasn't come yet. A survivor's terrifying ordeal. Few people have lived to describe what Jacob's Well is truly like beyond the third chamber. But one man, Don Dibble, did more than survive it. He was buried alive by it. And what he remembers from those terrifying minutes underwater still shakes even the most seasoned divers to the core. Don wasn't a weekend hobbyist or an overconfident thrill seeker. He was a certified expert, a former Navy diver with a career's worth of experience in tight caves and dangerous wrecks. But even he admitted that Jacob's Well was unlike anything else. In his words, the well doesn't fight back like a cave. It waits, and then it grabs. Back in 1979, Don was part of the team that responded after Kent Maupin and Mark Brashear disappeared into the fourth chamber. Most rescuers had already declared it a lost cause, but Don, with fellow diver Calvin Turner, believed there might still be time, if they could reach them. They dropped backup tanks at different depths and ran guidelines, every precaution taken. Then Don went in. He reached the tight corridor where Kent and Mark had vanished. The passage was narrow, packed with gravel, and so low that he had to remove his gear just to wedge himself forward. Every inch of movement stirred up more debris, and that's when it happened. The cave shifted. Without warning, a cascade of gravel collapsed on top of him, sealing him inside the tunnel like a zipper closing around his body. His chest was pinned. His arms were trapped. He couldn't back out, couldn't signal, couldn't breathe right. His air gauge read 1,100 psi, enough for maybe 10 minutes. And this is where Don's ordeal shifted from dangerous to downright crazy. He later contended that his mind started doing things he had not expected. It accepted death. The panic was not only physical, but an existential panic. Trapped, buried, all by himself, Don made a horrific decision. If he was to die, he wanted it over quickly. He did not want to linger in his dying process. Thus, he tried to drown himself, purposely drank water, gulping it down so that it would really end fast. But the body was unwilling to go along with him. There was a violent reaction to the swallowing of the water, resulting in spasms, swelling involuntarily. Those little muscle spasms just shifted the gravel enough. A beam of light flickered. Someone was there. Calvin Turner returned to Don's location with a spare regulator and shoved it into Don's mouth at the exact moment his lungs were blowing up. Don breathed in. He lived, but just barely. And yet still, the danger did not cease. It rose into him and got buoyed in his body on the way up. When he reached the top, his abdomen was so bloated as to look grotesque. He was flown to the Brooke Army Medical Center, where X-rays revealed a horror. His stomach was ruptured. The pressure ruptured it from the inside. The infection that ensued almost slain him a second time. He was taken to emergency surgery, and it took him months to recover. But that pain and injury were not the worst pains. What gave Don nightmares was the feeling of the cave wrapping around him in an embrace that truly felt like it would not let go. To be chosen by the well and barely turned down. Don would describe that dive for years to come as a near-religious experience. It wasn't a rescue, it was a resurrection. Almost all divers who have survived near misses tend to be very private about them. Don, in contrast, chose to devote his life to warning others. He tells his story in public. He gives interviews. He became the reason behind a multitude of divers turning back from the third chamber. His pain was responsible for saving lives. But Jacob's well would not be silenced after Kent and Mark, nor after Don would it relent. It kept calling to people, kept testing them. For some, their survival only made the mystery deeper, for if the well could choose those who made it back and those who didn't. What did that point to? And as we'll see next, there was still one man left who refused to give up, even when the well did everything it could to push him out. The recovery mission that failed. When Kent Maupin and Mark Brashear vanished into Jacob's Well in 1979, most believed their bodies would never be recovered. Even the most seasoned divers called it hopeless. But one man refused to let it go. Don Broad, a 46-year-old diver with nerves of steel and a personal tie to the area, wasn't ready to let the cave become legend. No matter how deep or dark, someone had to try. Broad wasn't a thrill-seeker. He was calculated, focused, and furious. Furious that 2 young lives had vanished. Furious that Jacob's Well had earned a reputation as a death trap. He believed the only way to reclaim the cave was to bring the bodies home. On arrival, Broad dove straight into the 4th chamber. Most avoided it like a tomb, but he entered with purpose. Almost immediately, he saw something under a veil of silt, a diver's light, still faintly glowing. It belonged to one of the missing men. Just beyond it, the tunnel was packed with tightly wedged stone. It didn't seem like a natural collapse. It looked like the cave had buried them. Broad surfaced and began organizing the most ambitious recovery mission Jacob's Well had ever seen. 2 days later, a flatbed truck rolled into Wimberley carrying what looked like a spacecraft. It was a mobile recompression chamber from the Schaefer Diving Company, hired by the victims' families. Cost was no concern. If there was even a sliver of hope, they would take it. Louis Schaefer, head of the company, suited up and took the first dive. Reaching the blocked tunnel, he radioed back, "God Almighty!" He wasn't swearing, he was stunned. The gravel was so tightly packed, it would take industrial suction just to begin clearing it. So they brought in a high-powered hose with a 60-foot reach. Divers pulled gravel out inch by inch. Larger stones were pried loose, loaded into sacks, and lifted to the surface. Teams rotated shifts, exhausting themselves in the effort. The cave, however, proved to be more than a match for their efforts to dig. Every time progress was made, fresh gravel slid in to replace what was removed, as if it were digging through sand. They clear space, then lose it again, but they keep pushing. Eventually, only human limits could be crossed by reality. The cost of equipment soared, labor wore down, volunteers fell away, drained emotionally and physically. Progress slowed. The mission faltered. Texas Senator Cadet Brooks even called in the big guns, Brown and Root, another elite diving firm. Maybe a second opinion could tip the odds. The team reviewed the footage and site, then gave its verdict. Risk was just too great. 12 days after Kent and Mark had disappeared, the search was called off. Not because it succeeded, but because there had to be an end to it. Jacob's Well claimed its 2 lives, and now the hope of being able to bring them back has been claimed by it. In a way, the failure burned for many men. Divers, families, locals, they all had poured out their souls in it. The cave had been taken without giving anything in return. Now, all that remained was silence and sorrow, along with the uncomfortable reality in which some places are not meant to be conquered. Lake teams left empty-handed, but Jacob's Well hadn't relinquished its secrets yet. And what they would learn next, years later, would make the previous failures even more tragic and terrifying. The well that breathes no more. Jacob's Well once breathed. Locals said you could hear it from the road, a gurgling roar, like the earth itself exhaling. That wasn't just folklore. Fueled by the Trinity Aquifer beneath Texas Hill Country, the spring once shot water 6 feet into the air. Over 170 gallons per second surged out, feeding Cypress Creek and turning the well into a natural marvel. But the breathing slowed. In 2000, Jacob's Well went silent for the first time in recorded history. No roar, no flow, just stillness. It wasn't a fluke. The silence returned. In 2008, 2011, 2013, and again in 2022, each time lasting longer than before. People began to wonder, was Jacob's Well dying? Scientists took notice. The Trinity Aquifer, once thought limitless, was being drained faster than it could refill. A major contributor was Aqua Texas, a legal but heavy user supplying water to homes, ranches, towns, and golf courses. The aquifer couldn't keep up. This wasn't just a drop in water levels, it was an ecosystem on the edge of collapse. In 2010, Hays County stepped in, buying 50 acres around the well to form a protective zone. The Wimberley Valley Watershed Association added another 31 acres, creating an 80-acre preserve. Restrictions followed: swimming, diving, access, all aimed at protecting what remained. But the real issue lay beneath the surface. To scientists, the Trinity Aquifer is just like a slow-breathing organism. It can exhale water for decades, but when it is fully discharged, recovery might take generations. And so, as the pressure dropped, the spring slowed to a crawl, as if by some metamorphosis. The once roaring geyser was a stagnant pool, a mouth without a voice. Ironically, it is the silences of the well that have drawn renewed attention. Viral underwater drone footage. It portrayed an eerie landscape, a glove drifting dead, and something else, quick, shadowy, impossible to identify. That flicker has ignited the old questions again. What's really down there at the bottom of Jacob's Well? Rock and water, or something more? Of course, even with sonar and robotics, drones still have places they cannot reach. Tight crevices and dark angles, blind corners. That's what haunts them the most. Not what we've seen, but what we haven't. A beautiful place, Jacob's Well, has evoked terror in the hearts of many with its grim chambers, and now has drawn mourners to itself for its resounding silence. But perhaps the greatest threat of all lies not in the depths within, but in forgetting. It is not only a swimming hole, but rather a living geological wonder that speaks every moment. Perhaps this is the message left behind by Jacob's Well. even the strongest forces of nature can never be defeated. They can inspire, feed, and astonish. But if we take too much without returning to them, they become quiet. Perhaps Jacob's well will never be stirred again, but they say that you can still feel it, some faint pressure, like the ghost of a breath, waiting if one stands by the edge on a day without wind. If you thought this story was wild, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for stories that'll stay with you long after the screen goes black. And if you think Jacob's Well is just a cave, think again. If you thought this was wild, just wait. Check the next video for even more mysteries from deep beneath the earth.